And the reason why I do that is after the call, I will upload a copy of the video, send it out. That way you have it as reference, right? If hopefully the content is of use and interesting. So if you want to go back and take a look, it will be available to you. All right. So I think I put it in the chat, but just as a reminder, if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. It makes it a little easier to handle. And also, if we do run out of time, if you put your questions in the Q&A section, I can follow up after the webinar and make sure that any of your questions are answered. It's easier for us to capture those questions. So a couple of things just real quick, just to run through the agenda. So this is what we call our power block type of webinar for anybody that hasn't joined in the past, where the idea is, let's pick a topic, part of our, VMware's cloud management platform, and dig in, right? Let's try to avoid PowerPoint. There will be a few slides that we're going to go to, and then we're going to jump right into one of my environments and actually, walk through some of the topics that we're talking about and actually, create a dashboard, right? We're here to talk about Aria Operations and dashboards. So one of the ideas would be to create a custom dashboard. So we're going to do just a quick Aria update for anybody that isn't familiar with some of what's going on in the VMware world. Talk about some of the concepts around dashboards, throw in a quick question just to keep things interactive, and then we'll jump into my environment. Walk through some of the different options that are available, how to create a dashboard, how to manage them. And then I have a few different resources that I thought would be, good next steps if you want to dig deeper, if you want good, some reference materials as you start exploring, operations on your own and potentially dig deeper into dashboards. So I am going to turn this over to Steve for a minute to just walk through some of what we have going on the cloud management side of VMware and explain a little bit about Aria. Some of you may know vRealize. So take it away, Steve.
Certainly. Well, thank you, Tom. So like Tom mentioned, some of you may be familiar with vRealize Operations or just vRealize Suite, vRealize in general. So obviously the very first thing we want to address is the name change. But it's not just a name change and rebranding change. It's actually bringing together several distinct areas and platforms. So really, to start off with Aria, really is a multi-cloud management platform, provides a solution for managing cost, performance, and configuration management. As you can see, there's kind of three pillars here that are designated. Aria Cost, Aria Operations, Aria Automation. So obviously, vRealize Operations is now Aria Operations. vRealize Automation is Aria Automation. We have a component of a company that we purchased about 5 years ago called Cloud Health, which is a financial operations and cost analysis platform that we've integrated into the Aria platform. As you can see on the bottom there, we treat all clouds alike. So whether it's a private cloud or a public cloud, we treat it all the same way. And you'll notice the big purple line there in the middle, which designates Aria Hub and Aria Graph. These are kind of the, if you want to look at like as the single pane of glass. I like to say, like back in the day, before I had a more modern car, if you want to do any kind of cost analysis or what have you, how much gas you use, how much mileage and so on, you may have used the program to do that, right? Obviously, if you added on your GPS system, it kind of told you where you had to go and so on. And of course, the standard dashboard gave you all the operation stuff, right? How engine light might pop on and so on. And then of course, anything that you needed to automate, you kind of did yourself, right? So now we have a more advanced car, which kind of ties it all together in a single dashboard. And your single dashboard, now you can see how much you're spending on gas, and you can operate your car, see all the components and information about performance and operations. And of course, anything that's automated now, you could speak your, I want to call Tom, and automatically go to your phone and place a phone call. So making that analogy, if we look all the way to the left there, VMware Aria Cost, once again, this is designed to basically govern the cost of your environment, whether it's on private cloud or multiple public clouds. That's a whole separate conversation that we won't discuss today. We just kind of wanted to give you a taste. And if anybody has any interest in hearing about that, we could certainly do that another time. VMware Aria Automation. So this in the past was, of course, vRealize Automation. And once again, this is designed to provide all of those functions, configuration management, automation, in a nutshell, a self-service type environment where now you can automate your complete environment so you can reduce costs, reduce errors, improve any performance issues that might occur. And of course, Aria Operations right there in the middle, which we'll really dive into today, is really the ability to see the insight, remediation of your environment when you have problems, and of course, making sure that your apps provide the optimal performance. With that, I think we'll move on and go deep dive right into the presentation and demo. So Tom, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. And if any of those other topics or any of the that we're not covering today are of interest, Steve and I are always happy to, have a conversation, have another meeting, and dig into whatever makes sense on anything that you may be working on. So, VMware Aria Operations, so formerly vRealize Operations, like Steve said, going through a little bit of a consolidation, some name changes, and really just making sure that some of our disparate products all fit into that same cloud management strategy here at VMware. So, just looking at the names of the attendees, I know a bunch of you are really familiar with Aria Operations, or at least have like some of the basic tenets. But I wanted to just put this up just as a reminder of really the four primary tenets of Aria Operations, right? Performance optimization. Make sure, really what that boils down to is, let's make sure that your workloads, your virtual machines in particular, are receiving the resources that they're asking for. What's the demand that they're asking for from the underlying infrastructure? Are they receiving the resources that they want? And if not, hey, what can we do to potentially alleviate that, make sure they're running as performant as possible? It might be right sizing, might be workload placement, a lot that we can do from there to make sure that our workloads are performant. Going hand in hand with that is capacity and cost management, right? If you start to run out of capacity in a particular environment, at some point you will probably start to have performance issues as your workloads grow and their needs change over time, things of that nature. And this is also the cost drivers, if you will, going back to what Steve was talking about around Aria cost and being able to have good visibility into, hey, what does it actually cost running, let's say, in my VMware cloud versus running in the public cloud. So this is the cost engine for vSphere for all intents and purposes. Intelligent remediation, it's all about troubleshooting, right? Hopefully we're being as proactive as possible and not just reacting with Aria Operations, right? But if something does go wrong, let's be able to dig in, understand quickly where is the problem, is there correlation, and have as much visibility into your overall infrastructure stack, from the infrastructure up potentially to your applications, be able to complete that picture, understand, hey, where is a potential issue, and what can we do to fix that? And then finally, that the integrated configuration and compliance is really just about reducing risk and making sure that if you do have any particular compliance or regulatory standards or needs that you need to meet at scale, that starts to become tricky, right? So with something like Aria Operations, we can, quickly look across, let's just say, all of your virtual machine landscape and understand what they're, hey, what operating systems are out there, VM tool versions, hey, are we following maybe the Center for Internet Security, any of those standards? So different ideas like that, where really it's just around, let's reduce risk at a larger scaled out environment. All right, so those are the core tenets, but how do we actually, how do we work with the tool to be able to take advantage of those capabilities, right? Good reminder, but all right, Tom, how do we actually interact or achieve those capabilities? So inside of Aria Operations, we have a slew of different capabilities, alerts, dashboards, reports, actions that we can take, all sorts of different capabilities. And today what we're going to do is dig in specifically to dashboards, how they work, some of what's available out of the box, and what you can basically achieve. So basically a high level definition of a dashboard, right? It's going back to Steve's analogy of looking at a car, right? Same thing as a car dashboard. We're presenting a visual overview of the performance, the state of the objects in your environment. So there are out-of-the-box dashboards, and you can also create your own dashboards by adding what we call widgets or views and configuring them, which we're going to walk through in a little bit and take a look at. So widgets, to give you an idea of what those are, is they're basically panes on your dashboards. So they make up the dashboard itself, and what you can configure them to show info about attributes, metrics, properties, resources, potentially applications, anything in your environment. They're interactive. There's different types. This is kind of small to see. In my environment, it should be a little easier to see some of the different widgets that are available, but there can be scorecards, there can be object explorers, pie charts. It all comes down to what it is that you're actually trying to visualize and making it as easy to consume as possible. On the view side, and we'll dig into this as well, Aria Operations provides several types of views. So the idea behind them is that each type helps you interpret metrics and properties of monitored objects in different ways. So in a sense, you can almost think of it as like having an Excel spreadsheet inside of the product, where now you can manipulate data and present it in a way that makes sense. And you could take those views and either add them to a dashboard, use them independently, or even add them to a report. So they are extremely helpful. There are hundreds of views out of the box, and they are really easy to create your own, which hopefully as we go through this, I'll give you some ideas of things that you can do. Beyond that, a couple other things I just wanted to call out, and we'll look at this too as we go through the presentation here, or my demo. You can share dashboards. There's a couple of different ways to share them, where once you create something, that's great, but you want to be able to present it to potentially other folks on your team, other teams. The customers I work with using Aria Operations that are really successful, they tend to create their own dashboards to help focus on specific objects, specific pieces of the environment, right? If you're looking at a landscape with, let's just say, 5,000 virtual machines, there are definitely going to be some that are more important than others. And depending on who you're talking to, there will also be more importance depending on the team, depending on who owns the application, the VM, however you're looking at it. So point of this is my customers that I see being really successful are leveraging dashboards to provide views into specific pieces of their environment and sharing that with the different teams that are responsible for that environment. And then finally, we do have what we call a sample exchange. It's out on our developer code.vmware.com site. I will share the link and we'll take a look at it as well, where, hey, maybe you don't want to start from scratch. If somebody's already created a dashboard and, hey, maybe you need to make a little tweak, or you're trying to visualize something that somebody's already done. We have a community where you can, and you're welcome to add to it as well, where if you create an interesting dashboard, you can upload it into the community, and then other users of vRealize Operations can pull those dashboards down, import them into their environment, and just start taking advantage of them. There are a significant amount that are out there. So if you haven't looked at our sample exchange in the past, I highly recommend checking it out. All right, so I wanted to put this in just as a kind of a commentary. So one of the things that we're doing at VMware around Aria Operations is we're always working to improve usability. For those of you that have been using it for any long period of time, maybe going back to the vCops days, maybe going even earlier than that, if you look at the product today versus even a few years ago, it's drastically different. We've made some really good improvements. It happens to be possibly my favorite tool or product at VMware. And basically what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible. And more, recently what we've done is we've done some revamps to the dashboards themselves. So from an out-of-the-box perspective, we've kind of arranged them more in a persona or function-based arrangement, which we'll take a look at. So it's a little easier to find. And from a creation perspective, we've tried to make it as easy as possible to create a dashboard and add interactions and make them as usable as possible. So hopefully anybody that's listening is in agreement that yes, we've made some really good steps forward, and going forward, you should continue to see us add different capabilities and always really just striving to improve the usability. I was hoping to be able to put in some details of our latest release, which is coming imminently, but it's not effectively GA'd yet, general availability, so I don't have a slide on any of the new features. There is a blog that I'll post in a minute that goes into some of what we're doing to add in something that we're calling a launch pad, again, to just provide more focus into what is exactly important to you, rather than having a lot of information at your fingertips, but not really being sure where to start. So for those of you that own Aria Operations today or are consuming it via our SaaS services, expect to see a new version coming really soon. I can't give you an exact date, but shortly. All right, so with that, like I said, promise to keep the slides to a minimum. We're going to jump into my environment. And while I switch over to that, I'm going to put up a quick poll, if anybody doesn't mind answering. Just a real basic question. Have you ever created a custom dashboard in Aria Operations? Curious to see where our attendees are at. All right, so far leaning towards no. So this should hopefully be a good session for everybody. All right, let me take that off my screen. Get out of our slides for now. And Steve, can you just confirm real quickly that you can still see my screen? It should show vRealize Operations, and I'm pointing to VM Ignite.
Yes.
You're still out there? All right, cool,
good.
thank you. Just wanted to make sure. All right, so taking a look inside of one of my labs right now. So the first thing I wanted to just start with is I am running one of the latest versions at the moment. Like I said, new version coming. One of the things that we've done fairly recently is we've moved some of the options, the menu bars, if you will, from across the top down on the side here. The idea is to just give more real estate to the screen itself. So we're going to take a look under visualize. So underneath here is where we will see our dashboards and our views and our reports. I'm going to take a quick look at views first before we jump into dashboards. So you can see when we click into views here, going back to what I was saying about making it more persona or function based, on the home page of our views, we can see we've divided them up into several categories. So hey, what are we trying to look at? Are we trying to look at, get some details on availability, some capacity, maybe configuration, inventory, performance? And we'll just take a look at an example here. So if we go under configuration, these are different views that are available that we can look at. So there's a VM configuration view. Let's take a look at this. And you can see here right now, my preview source. This is where you can choose, hey, I'm literally just looking at the raw view at this point in time. I'll show you another place that you can actually access views as well. But this is where you would choose, all right, what do we want to put our focus on, right? So this view is based on providing virtual machines and details about those virtual machines. So here, looking at vSphere World, that basically means everything that vRealize Operations is is aware of, if I can speak properly, in my vSphere environment. So, what we have is basically just a simple list view. Like I said, very similar to an Excel spreadsheet, if you will, where we can go through and just quickly understand and, hey, none of you, well, maybe some of you have seen my lab, but you can get a quick idea of some of what I have going on just at a glance here as a basic view. All right, hey, some VMs, some host names, my VM hardware versions, which is, you could see I'm all over the place, you know, creation date for those virtual machines. These two are ancient, which is why they don't have a date, you know, what operating system they're running, and then some basic details on their configs. So relatively straightforward. And from here, we could take this view and we can export it to CSV if we wanted to. And we can also create, you know, basically a URL and a header, you know, to be able to allow a third-party tool to reach in and reach into vRealize operations via API and grab this data. So if, let's say, you were using something like Power BI and you needed some, you know, you wanted to feed some information from Aria Operations, you could potentially create a view and use that to export the data into a third-party tool, which I think is kind of interesting. I've been seeing more of that popping up lately. And you can edit the view. We're not going to delete the view. And then from there, there's also a list of, you know, every view that's available. So potentially if you added a management pack in, so, you know, ops is extensible where we can add management packs to provide additional metrics, dashboards, views of other things beyond what's built in out of the box. So if, let's say, I wanted to monitor Microsoft SQL Server, for example, we have a management pack that can do that, and it adds in different views and dashboards that we can leverage. So you can, I highly recommend spending time just going through the views, understanding what's available. You know, as you can see here, there is quite a bit, and it's more or less broken out by the object type, what we're looking at. So you can see there's a slew available for data stores. And if nothing else, if you don't know where to start or not even sure where to begin, you can always just start to search, if I could type, and it'll quickly bring up a list of, you know, hey, what's available that focuses on virtual machines, right? Maybe we want to look at clusters. So anything that you want to, you know, potentially look at, we can just start to search and it'll start to narrow down what we have available. If we go into manage, this is where you can see, you know, again, this is just literally the raw views. I have 1,111. Probably couldn't do that if I tried. Currently inside of my lab, where we can easily add another one. We can export, import, delete them. And on the view itself, we can always, you know, we can clone, which is really important. It's something I was going to call out as we get into dashboards. If you decide that you want to edit something that's out of the box, maybe you like this availability ping by source packet loss list, but you want to change something slightly. Anything that's out of the box, I always recommend. Sorry, I see a comment. Probably slightly different depending on whether you know the amount of views you have. It comes down to any management packs you've added or any custom dashboards or views that you've created or added yourself. That's why you might see different numbers in different instances. So from here, you can clone a view. And what that basically does, it's just going to take what's in there, and then, you know, you can create a new name, whatever you wanted to do here. And the reason why I recommend this is, number one, yeah, let me get out of this. Sometimes if you edit something that's out of the box during an upgrade, there is potential that it may get reset. And also, the reason why cloning is a good thing is now you still have that base object. If you know you clone something, you start working on it, editing it, and you make a mess, do something that you know is unexpected, you can always go back to the original. So I recommend cloning anything out of the box, and even something that you've created, you can easily clone it and have more of a dev test type of copy, if you will. That way, you're not just messing around with something that you have, you know, you've already created. All right, so enough about views, and let's go into dashboards. So on the dashboards page, same idea where we have, you know, a home page where we're breaking out dashboards, again, based more on, you know, hey, are you concerned about performance? Are you concerned about inventory? It really comes down to what it is that you're actually trying to do, what you're trying to look at inside of operation itself, right? So different ways to just get started and figure out what's available to you rather than scrolling through a list, which can be considerable. So we have our home screen, manage section. We'll get to that in a minute, where you can create. We have a favorites. So you can see here real easily, there's a couple of different ways to add a favorite, but if you know, hey, this is a dashboard that I really like, I can just click this little star and it'll now show up underneath my favorites. So it's really easy to find dashboards that you're using a lot, right? You can get back into them quickly. We also do have a recent menu. So for any dashboards that you've used recently, it should show up underneath here. And then, every dashboard that is available inside of the product, broken down again by, what it's focusing on, or maybe the object type. Like you can see, I have a bunch of SQL Server databases, dashboards that are here. And this is coming from a management pack, True Visibility Suite management pack, that adds in capabilities to monitor Microsoft SQL Server. Another thing to always remember, so you can see this question mark here. If you click that, it's going to take you to in context help. So obviously we have our documentation. There's a lot out there. So what I find really helpful is that on the majority of screens that we'll be in, you will see a question mark where if you click that, it's going to take you to some documentation that it's going to explain, all right, hey, what am I looking at? And obviously this is fairly high level, just accessing predefined dashboards. And then from there, you can dig in deeper. So, but really helpful, easy way to find some help on whatever it is that you're trying to do. So just as an example, let's pick on inventory, and we'll look at, let's look at my whole vSphere inventory summary. So again, the idea here is let's use a dashboard to provide a visual overview, right? Let's understand what we have in the environment. So again, like I was mentioning earlier, no one knows what I have in my lab, right? But this can give you a quick idea of what I have going on here. How many VMs I have, how many are running, how many hosts, how many clusters, how many data stores, and then breakdowns basically of, and these are examples of widgets to call that out a little bit, where we've got, all right, a breakdown of my data centers. These are my virtual data centers. Roberto, I'll answer that in just a second. Compute, storage, a breakdown of my ESXi versions. You can see I'm a little behind here. No one laugh at me, please. Server models, vendors, data store types. So I've got some iSCSI, some vSAN, VMs by memory type, operating systems, and you can expand any of these widgets, right, to maximize it, make it a little easier to look at. So this is a breakdown of all the operating systems in my environment. And from here, if I wanted to, okay, let's look at my Ubuntu VMs. I can quickly just click on that piece of the pie, and it'll give me a breakdown of all of the VMs that are running Linux. So obviously, this is relatively easy to consume in a smaller environment. Once you get into hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of VMs, you may have a large list here. But again, the idea is let's just give you some high-level looks at this point of what the breakout looks like. You could always focus on a specific widget. You can see this little eye to show toolbar, so we can set different dates and times. We can export out to CSV. These are basic pie charts, so there isn't a lot that you can do with them. A little bit more here, because we have more of a list view where we can get into different objects. And obviously we can click on any of these objects and quickly jump to the specific object itself. All right, so this is an example. This is completely out of the box. Once you connect it to vCenter, it'll start populating the data. It's available here. There are a lot of out-of-the-box dashboards. So another thing I highly recommend is just spending a little bit of time, either starting at the home page or going through the list. Same thing here. If you wanted to do a search and just start to see what's available. It's actually more than, yeah, there we go. Say a few more dashboards focused on virtual machines. And as we go through this, you could see, just tying back to some of those tenants that we were talking about from vRealize Operations, here's I have VM capacity dashboards, config dashboards, cost dashboards. So there's a lot that are out of the box that you can just start to use without really having to do much. Now we also have examples of some custom dashboards. So that's where, like I was saying, when we were looking at that pie chart, it can be, depending on the size of your environment, you may need to start to focus on, specific applications, specific components of the environment. Maybe you want to look more at production workloads versus dev test. Maybe you want to divide things up by by business unit, by department, by however logically your business is structured. And that's kind of a separate topic on how you can use Aria Operations to group your workloads into logical constructs, if you will. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into building a dashboard. But wanted to give you an example of a custom dashboard here. So this is something I built with, well, it's an example mock-up for another customer of mine, where one of their use cases for Aria Operations was they have their applications are all a lot of 3-tier. Microsoft SQL is the back end. So in what they wanted to do was they wanted to be able to bridge the gap between their virtual infrastructure team and their DBAs. If the DBAs were looking at things from a SQL perspective, the virtual infrastructure team was looking at things from a vSphere perspective, right? And they wanted to try to meet in the middle and give the DBAs better insights into what was going on in the infrastructure itself, so that way they can maybe figure out, hey, is it a SQL problem? Is it an infrastructure problem? And not always going to the infrastructure team. So here, what this dashboard is doing, so again, some different widgets, and these are just some different examples. This is an object picker. I have a Microsoft SQL Server instance. So with the customer, they would have hundreds listed here. I have a single one to keep down on my licensing costs. And this is coming to answer Roberto's question in the chat. We can monitor SQL one of two ways. You can either use a TVS management pack, which does out-of-band connectivity, so basically does an ODBC connection to SQL, or we also have a Telegraph agent-based solution where you would install a small agent based on Telegraph, and we can pull metrics that way as well. So 2 different ways that we can do this. So this widget is providing data to this scoreboard and this object relationship. So you can see here, I know it's a little tough to see, here's that SQL Server instance. These are all the different databases that are running there, even some queries that are running. And then we can actually go up the stack too and see what VM it's running on, what host, what cluster. So just to give a little bit of a better view of, hey, what are the relationships? What does this database instance have going on? From there, we're feeding in a bunch of different data. So because operations is aware of inventory trees and can traverse through the environment and understand relationships, by clicking on the instance, it's going to show me, okay, this is the VM that it's related to. And now in the customer's environment, their workloads were really latency sensitive. So we wanted to really be able to visualize latency at every level to understand, is it do we have latency at the VM level? Is it at the host level? So based on that instance and the relationships, I can figure out, all right, and this is all happening behind the scenes automatically. This is the VM that instance is running on. This is the vSphere host that virtual machine is running on. Metrics from the host itself. This is the data store that's associated with that VM that it's running on. And then this blank spot here, the customer was running Pure Storage. So they also had a Pure Storage management pack that was pulling in data to show the actual disks and the information from a Pure array perspective of where this data store actually lives. I wish I had Pure in my lab. I do not. So that's why I have a blank space. And then we did a couple other things like pulling in, if we wanted to dig deeper into any of these metrics, they can click here and get more of a chart view rather than a scoreboard, so that now they can look and say, all right, give me the last 30 days, give me the last 60 days. What kind of latency am I looking at in my environment? You can see it's fairly static. I had one large blip going back into March here that I should probably take a look at. And then any alerts that are associated with the VM as well. So this is just an example of a custom dashboard where based on your needs, you can, customize it to, to basically provide any details that you want to show. All right, so let's actually create a dashboard so I can give you an idea of some of what you can do. All right, so once I click create dashboard, what's going to happen is our design canvas is going to come up. So a couple of things to think about here. So number one, the rough use case that we're gonna use to model out here is we're gonna create a dashboard that's gonna provide visibility into different custom groups that I have created inside of Aria Operations. The custom groups, like I was saying earlier, are rough. They can be, apps, they can be groups of VMs, they can be departments, however you want to divide up your workloads and basically categorize them in a particular way. So, all right, first thing we want to do is create a new dashboard. A really good best practice that I could throw out here is to be aware of your naming. So PS, Tom Zabo, I'm going to pen that for my dashboard name here simply because it's a good, easy way for me to differentiate dashboards that I created versus out-of-the-box dashboards. So I'll just call it dashboard webinar. And now from here, what we can start to do is drag on, like I was saying, these widgets that we can configure. We have, I think there's around 40. So, and we're definitely not going to have time to go through all of these today. And some of them, I'll be frank, some of them are more useful than others, depending on what it is that you're trying to show. But a very common starting point is to use an object list. So you just pick the widget that you want to use and you drag it up onto the canvas. You can resize them. They do snap into place, and you'll see how this starts to come together as I add additional widgets. Another recommendation sometimes is to actually just start with a pen and paper and just draw out what you want something to look like before you start. Another thing to think about is really, hey, what is important? What am I trying to visualize and show? So what's important to me? It's a good starting point. And then you can start to play around and create a dashboard. So like I said, my use case here is to have visibility into my custom groups. So we're going to put a name. Oh, actually, let me not put, just say custom groups. We're going to refresh content. So what refresh content basically means is, will the widget refresh itself automatically? So 300 seconds, every 5 minutes, it'll refresh. The self-provider is important. So we're going to turn it on. So what the self-provider means is the widget going to reach in and grab, the object, the information that it's going to work with itself, or is it going to be fed in from another widget? Might be a little bit tricky to understand right now, but as we build this out, hopefully it'll make more sense. And auto select first row just basically means you want it to, you want that widget to select the first object in our lists, which sure, why not? So from there, input data, we're going to leave alone. So this is where you can start to narrow down the objects that it's associated with. And output filter is really important here. So, hey, what do I actually want to show? So there's a few different ways to do an output filter. Either a basic, we're just going to choose an object type, or advanced, where you can get really granular with some criteria to specify, hey, what exactly do I want to show up on this list? So in this case, we're going to just come down, choose object types. And there's a lot of them because it's every type of object that I can possibly monitor here. And if, let's just say I wanted a basic list of virtual machines, we could just come down here and choose virtual machines, and it's going to give me a list of every VM that I have. But what I really want to do is choose hosted. So hosted is a specific custom group type that I've already created. So there are 6 custom groups that are a member of this hosted group type. So we're going to go with this, and we're going to click save. And now there are my custom groups inside of Aria Operations that I've already predefined. So I've got one for Windows, my vRealize lab, my production workloads, some development workloads. I have no idea what I'm doing with test, and then my Linux-based workloads. So again, These can be applications, they could be whatever makes sense in your environment. Real easy way to just divide up and put focus on a subset of your, your landscape, if you will. So now I'm going to create a scoreboard. So we're going to drag that up on here. So a scoreboard is just basically going to present a nice graphic representation of different metrics. So we're going to edit this widget. So same thing, we're going to put refresh content on. Now in this case, it's not going to be a self-provider. And what's going to happen is based on what I select in my custom group, it's going to populate this scoreboard based on that group. So that's why we're going to leave this off. It'll make more sense in a minute when I add the interaction. And then from there, you can customize, the look and feel of, what you want the scoreboard to look like. So, how many columns do you want? Do you want to round up decimals? Do you want a fixed view for these boxes? What do you actually want to show? The visual theme. So I'm going to choose pastel. I really like that, the look of this. So as you make changes, it'll update the preview so you can have an idea of what's actually going to happen here. So the input transformation, what this comes down to is, all right, so I'm going to click on one of these objects, and do I want information about the object itself, or do I maybe want information about, a child object? So if it's a custom group that's made up of VMs, the VMs are the children, or maybe a parent. In this case, that really wouldn't apply at all. And then from there, output data. All right, what kind of information do I want to show? So we're going to add metrics, right? So we can just slim it down. Always remember, there's always a filter. So we're going to choose virtual machines, and we're just going to do a couple of quick ones because I want to be cognizant of time. So I want a health metric, risk metric. Oh, and actually, my bad. I don't want to use, what am I thinking? So, because I want to add metrics for the custom group itself. For the, my custom object type, and now we can add in the right metrics. Add in my risk. And then I also have some super metrics that are available. Again, that's definitely a separate separate webinar, but we'll just say it's a way to manipulate metrics, combine metrics. It's almost like having Excel formulas that you can do different things. So let's just do total cost. And then you can edit your labels just to make it a little easier to understand whatever's convenient for you. And we'll just put in total cost, MTD, which stands for month to date, and click update, click save. Oh, and if I was, what I should have done, following my own best practices, is to have a good name here. So group KPI scoreboard. I've seen some other folks number their different widgets so that you can have more of a workflow approach. It doesn't really make much sense in this particular dashboard for what I'm trying to do here, but that is something that you can do. You can number them. So now when we click show interactions here, now I can see, all right, so here's my custom groups. There's my group KPI scoreboard. So I can attach this widget to this scoreboard. And what this does now is when I click on one of my custom groups, there are the metrics that are associated with that particular custom group. So real easy to start to, all right, now I can quickly go through, hit all of them and understand, all right, hey, what do I have going on? Maybe I want to visualize some cost data, and there's nothing in that container. So it's costing me, all of my Linux VMs for whatever reason are running me $1,000 so far this month, which is interesting. I might have to edit my cost drivers a little bit. And we're going to create throw a couple other widgets out here just to give you some examples. You can put an alert list. Group active alerts. Put refresh content on. It's not going to be a self-provider again. At this point, I want alerts for the object, the group itself, and any virtual machines that are in that group. So we're going to leave the children checked here as well. We'll click save. All right, we're going to add the interactions in a minute. I'm just going to move a little quickly so we don't run out of time. Just to give you guys some ideas of what you can potentially do here. Another example would be object relationship. So maybe we want a graphic representation of what makes up these groups. So we dragged it on, now we can edit it. And we'll call this group membership. Same thing, refresh content. We're going to leave it off, leave self-provider off. And we can click save. Let's update some interactions here just so we can start to see, make sure everything's working properly. And now you can see, more of a focus on, all right, these are the alerts that are active on any of the VMs in this particular group or the group itself. We can look here, and now we have a visual representation of these are the VMs that make up, that are inside of this particular group. So we could see the dashboard starting to take some shape here. Maybe we want to add in a view. So we talked about views earlier. Maybe I want to add in some trending. I have to resize some widgets here. There we go. So we can edit a trend. And maybe we want to look at, just as an example, maybe I've been struggling with disk space. So I want to see storage trends. And now what we want to do is I'm going to look for, I happen to know of a view called capacity. And I'm looking for capacity with VM disk space, because that's what I actually want to see. And this is a trend-based view here. So we're going to select that. And we're going to say save. Same thing with show interactions. We can go here, hide interactions. I might not have gotten that right. Oh, there we go. Just needed a minute to populate. And now I have a view that's showing me trends. And you can see my lab is fairly static in a lot of cases. So there's not a lot changing here. And same thing, you have different time settings that you can adjust, or we can just say, all right, let's just tie it to the dashboard time. So once I actually save this, you'll have up in this section, you can select the time frame for the dashboard itself. All right, so we have our storage trends. Maybe we want to look at, let's go back to widgets. Maybe we want an idea of what's going on inside of those different groups. So we could do something like this. We can edit this object list and just say detected services, because one of the capabilities of Aria Operations is that we have service discovery. So we could use VM tools to do basically a netstat, if you will, netstat on steroids, to detect different services that are running on, on virtual machines, for example. So in this case, because we're not looking at services at the group level, we're actually looking at them on the virtual machine level. So what we're going to do is say, all right, we want to look at the children of the group, and depth equals 2, which basically just means traverse down 2 levels. So this gets a little tricky to think about, but once you get familiar with the inventory tree of Aria Operations and how things are related, it makes a little bit more sense to understand the concepts of children, self, and how things are related. And now we're going to go back to the output filter, and same thing that we did before, but now we're looking for object types. I want to see services. Click save. If we go back to show interactions, we can feed the original object list into this object list. Click hide. And now from here, if I click on my custom groups, we can see, all right, these are the services that have been detected from there. All right. We can also do things like if, let's say, we went back to views and we wanted to do, let me just scroll down and drop this on the bottom here. Edit in. Again, we could select any of our pre-existing views, or we could actually even add our own. So let's just say we wanted to call this VM details, and we wanted to add a specific view. So we're going to create a view, and we're going to call it webinar view. Good descriptions are always a good idea as well, but we're going to skip over that for the sake of time. And now from here, it's just a matter of, all right, what do I want to look at? All right, so I want to be able to look at virtual machine metrics here. So I've added my subject, virtual machine. And then it's just a matter of coming down and figuring out, all right, what's important? Do I want to show metrics? Do I want to show properties? So in this case, maybe I want to see the name. So what's the name of the VM? Maybe I want to see, we'll just do IP address. Just going to do some quick examples. Double click it or drag it over. You can do creation for creation date. Oh, actually, let's use this one. And then the reason why I chose creation date is I wanted to show when you add a metric over in a view like this, there's a bunch of different things that you can do with it. So you can set the units. All right, so in this case, it's detecting that it's time, basically, it's a date. So how do we want to look at it? And then you can transform it as well. So the creation date would currently be in machine language, if you will. So we can just say, all right, hey, we want to, it's a timestamp, right? Show me the time. And you can start to see the preview of my view as I'm building it out. So we're fairly happy with that. We can say create. And then we can click save. We're going to go back to show interactions. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add an interaction from that group membership widget to VM details. And what that means is now if you wanted to, all right, so hey, I'm looking at my Windows group here, got some KPIs, my scoreboard, alerts, membership, storage trends for those VMs in that group, detected services. And then if I wanted to, all right, let's just say I wanted to look at, sorry, my mouse is going crazy here. If I wanted to look at, DB, for example, I can come in here and get more details. Well, that one doesn't have a creation date because it's ancient. But here's my development 602, my name, my IP address, when it was created, so on and so forth. So whatever metrics or properties that I wanted to show, they would be listed there. At that point, we can click save. And now I have a dashboard that is available that I can add it as a favorite. I could potentially share it out as a URL. So this is one way to share a dashboard. If you're running Aria Operations on-prem, if I sent this link out to anybody and you had access to this fully qualified domain name and can connect, you would be able to open this dashboard. It would be fully interactive without needing to log into operations. On the SaaS side, it's not that simple. It's a little bit different simply because of how we authenticate and how we have access into the product itself. Go to manage. I just want to show you two more things. I know we're getting tight on time. If we find that dashboard that I just created, my dashboard webinar, you can see right now, it's only viewable by me. If I click this little icon, I can give access to everybody inside of the product, or I can, assign specific groups if I have different groups set up inside of Aria Operations, and they could certainly be Active Directory groups if you're tied into AD, for example. There's my clone. There's my export if I want to make a copy of it. So I highly recommend, and I know, like I said, we're about to run out of time here. I just wanted to throw up one other quick slide just to look at around content management. So you can export on an individual basis, dashboards and views, or underneath administration inside of Aria Operations, you can actually create an export bundle. So this is really helpful to do a full-blown export if, let's just say, you need to reinstall, do a new instance, or if you just want to have a backup before an upgrade, anything that you want to do. It's a real easy way to export out any of the custom content that you've spent time on, that you've put effort into, and you want to make sure you have a backup. Another option around content management is to use something like vRealize Lifecycle Manager, which can actually hook into Aria Operations and send a view or a dashboard up to something like GitLab and protect it that way. So that's another option as well. Don't quite have enough time to jump into that, but that is something that I'd be happy to show anybody at some point in the future, if that would make sense. And then what I wanted to just throw up here, and I should throw out that after this webinar is over, I will process the video. I'll make a copy of this presentation, and you all will receive a copy of it. I put in a couple of links that I thought would be helpful. One, the actual link to the documentation on dashboards themselves, the Aria Operations Tech Zone on VMware.com. So that's a good resource to go for how-to videos, documentation, hands-on labs, a good way to dig deeper into what we can do. There's a good YouTube video out, which I have to change that typo. That is basically the School of Ops dashboards made easy. A lot of the same content that we talked about today, but really good, to dig deep and have as reference. A link to that sample exchange, so you could potentially pull down existing or other custom dashboards. And then my YouTube channel, blatant self-promotion, where I put videos like this up for, for you to consume at your leisure. So with that, I know we're right at the top of the hour. Apologize for running long here. I'm sure people have to jump, but I wanted to just take a minute and answer any questions here. So if everybody can hang on, I will go through the Q&A. And if you have to jump, I understand. Really appreciate the time. So thank you for joining. And let me just take a quick look at our answers. So Matt asks, can you clear the recents list? Not currently. There are some changes that are happening where it won't be as, it'll be a little easier to manage. The recents list today gets a little unwieldy, where there's a lot of items, a lot of dashboards listed. So there is some work being done to make it less full. The only way to really put it. And then I have services twice in my object types list. They both show 0. It's interesting that it's showing up twice. It's possible that your service discovery isn't configured. And then it says, what do I need to do to enable the service discovery on VM? So let me just jump in and show you really quickly where that is. Cool. So if we go into integration, so this is where we tie into, vCenter, SQL Server, if we were adding in a cloud account into AWS. So here's my connection to vCenter. If we edit this, this is where you put in your vCenter server name, service credentials, and then we have a couple of other tabs. If you're running vSAN, you can flick this on, and it'll automatically pick up vSAN and start to pull in, information based on vSAN. And then there's service discovery. So you could turn this on. And service discovery works in 2 different ways, just real quickly. It's using VM tools. It can be, you don't have to authenticate depending on the version of VM tools you're running and if everything's set up a particular way. So there's actually a KB that we reference, or you can put in specific credentials. So I don't recommend using administrator. I'm a little floppy there with my AD, but Windows makes it really easy with Active Directory. You can have a service account, domain admin, that you can easily just reach out and talk to all of your virtual machines. So there is a lot of details in the documentation about service discovery. And I actually think even on my channel, I have a YouTube video that goes in depth into it. So it might be worth checking out. And then I have one other question is when to use a view or a dashboard. So a view, I would say, is really around, hey, I've got a specific bit of information that I'm looking for on a specific object type. So like, hey, I want a VM, information on a particular VM or something like that. So it's very focused on, all right, these are VMs. Whereas a dashboard can be, you're pulling in data from multiple sources, visualizing data from multiple objects. If we go back to my NB stack info here, where, hey, I've got info from SQL Server and info from the VM, metrics from the host, metrics from the data store. So it allows you to combine objects and different bits of data depending on what it is you're trying to visualize. So in this case, it was really all about seeing the full stack. All right, so thank you again for everybody that's hung in there. Sorry I went long. I really appreciate the time. Hopefully this was helpful. And like I said, just look for that follow-up email from the webinar that'll have a copy of the video and hopefully a copy of my presentation. Thanks a lot. Hope everyone has a great day, and we will talk soon. Have a good one.